so appreciate being invited to your country with two of my daughters who are sitting in the front row. There was a very well-known poet from the last century named Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and he offered this poem that I would like you to consider. And as I say it, I'd like you to ask yourself if what his conclusion in the poem, whether or not it is accurate, whether it is true for you, whether you believe in such a thing. He said, what if you slept? And what if in your sleep you dreamed? And what if in your dream you went to heaven and there picked a strange and wonderful flower? And what if, when you awoke, you held that flower in your hand? Ah, what then, the poet asks. I ask you to consider that because it leads to the idea that there is much more to this idea of being human than what we have been conditioned to believe is possible or not possible. I have always believed and lived from a place within myself that with God, all things are possible. And when I say these words, I mean all things are possible. And that leaves nothing out. All things. I think of your country. I've done a bit of research and looking at the history of your beautiful country. There are two countries in this part of the world that I find a very interesting history. One of them is Libya, and the other is here, the UAE. And oil was discovered at approximately the same time in Libya and here, back a half a century or so ago. One man had a vision about what to do with that wealth that would come to this part of the world. Sheikh Zayed, I don't know if I'm saying that properly. And Sheikh Zayed is one of those people that, as I was speaking earlier, just having a conversation, saying that, you know, it isn't just certain times in history that prophets show up, that prophets are here, that there are elevated beings who live at an elevated level of consciousness, who have a vision that won't go away. And in Libya, for some reason, the people who took the enormous amount of wealth that came into them as a result of this discovery of oil, a country was developed in which there wasn't the same emphasis that was placed by Sheikh Zayed, who decided that this was going to be a country that was going to be based upon living from a place of love and kindness. And this was to be an oasis in a otherwise part of the world which wasn't accustomed to the kinds of thoughts that he had. And I must say that one person's vision, one individual who has a consciousness in which they can't let it get away from them, they can't escape from what it is that they are told, being told by themselves, that the most amazing things can happen. I was told that the first thing that Sheikh Zayed did when he received the first payment for this discovery of oil was to build a road, a paved road, so that people could come into the city, that hospitals were to be built, that orphanages were to be provided, that schools were going to be, that the people were going to be educated. And as I've been driven around your country and been a guest here for the past several days, as with my daughters, It's one of the most delightful and eye-opening experiences to see what a vision that one individual can have and how it can change the entire direction of humanity. There have been people like this who have lived, who have made this kind of impact. And I've always felt that that kind of consciousness is within each and every one of these. That it is said of some of the great prophets that when they would go into a village, it's said of Jesus, it was said of Buddha, it was said of Muhammad. And when they would enter a village, just their presence in the village and nothing more would raise the consciousness, the thoughts of every single person in the village without having to say or do anything. Such is the capacity of those who make the choice to live from a place that I call God realization. I was blessed not too long ago, back in 1989, to be in the presence in the room with, and on a radio interview with Mother Teresa. And Mother Teresa stood about this tall, 4'10", probably didn't weigh 80 pounds. And this little woman from Albania walked into the room, and even the people who didn't know that she was there were impacted and affected by her presence. This is a consciousness that I believe is possible for all of us. That I started up here, and I put this on the podium. This orange is a wonderful metaphor. A few years ago, I was giving a lecture in Toronto, and there was a little boy named Tommy sitting right here in the front row, about 8, 9, 10 years old. And I asked him, I said, "You know what this is?" And he said, "It's an orange." And I said, if I take this orange and I were to squeeze this orange as hard as I can squeeze it, I said, what would come out? And he said, juice, of course. I said, well, would you think we could get tomato juice if we squeezed it real hard? He said, no. I said, do you think we could get grapefruit juice out of this if we squeezed it real hard? He said, no. I said, well, what kind of juice would come out of here? And he said, well, it would be orange juice. I said, that's the right answer. And I said, why? Why, when I squeeze an orange, does orange juice come out? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, well, it's an orange. He said, and that's what's inside. And I said, and that's the answer. Now, I extend that metaphor to you and to each and every one of us. And when someone squeezes you, that is, puts pressure on you, that is, says something about you that you find offensive, that is, behaves towards you in a way that you would be upset about, that is in a way that you think they shouldn't have behaved, and out of you comes anger, and out of you comes fear, and out of you comes stress, and out of you comes anxiety and worry, and all of the things that are so much a part of our individual lives. Is it because of who did the squeezing, which is what most of us believe? If she wouldn't have done that, if he wouldn't have done, if the circumstances would have only changed, then I wouldn't have to be so upset. But the fact is that if I take this orange and I ask anybody else to squeeze it, the same thing is going to come out of it. Orange juice, because that's what's inside. And if we only have love inside of us, then that's the only thing that can come out, no matter what it is that takes place. I was just told a story about the founder of your country, that when some people had come and were practicing a different religion and were going to be persecuted, some of the people here were upset about that. One of his first meetings, one of the first things he said is that we will only allow love to come out of us. We have tolerance for all people. This is not something that most people believe about this part of the world. It's been eye-opening for my children. to come here and to see the incredible love that has been extended to us who come from a different culture and a different way of life. This is something that was in the man who, when he was squeezed, the only thing that could come out is that which is inside. And my goal in my life has been to get to a place where I live from a place of God realization. That is, that there are different kinds of love, and I aspire at this time in my life, at the age of 72, to live from this place and this place only, so that no matter what kind of pressure is put on me, no matter what I hear, the only thing I want to come out of me is the kind of thing that came out of your beloved founder. This is not just a prescription for building a wonderful country, but it's a prescription for creating a world in which we can finally, once and for all, rid ourselves of the violence and the hatred and the bitterness and the tension and the fears and the wars and the kinds of things that so dominate the media and the kinds of things that we are hearing every day in our lives. So it seems to me that there are really two selves that we have within us. One of these selves is called, I call it the ego, E-G-O. To me, it is a synonym and an acronym for edging God out. And my teacher in India, Nisargadatta Maharaj, called this thing, this ego, he called it the false self. And the false self is a belief system that we have that tells us that who we are is defined by certain kinds of qualities and characteristics. We are told that our identity is in not so much who we are, because we can't answer this question. So many people have difficulty. If I were to ask the question, and I've done this many, many times with patients when I had a practice many years ago, can you just answer the question, who am I? As we contemplate that simple little question with 3 words, who am I, what comes out very often is all of the things that identify us with this false self. And the false self is really the part of us that believes that who I am is what I own, what I have. So if we begin to believe that who we are is identified with what it is that we own, then we have a tendency to say, the more of it that I have, the more important I am, and the better than I am. And so we'll also spend a big hunk of our life going after and trying to accumulate as much stuff as we possibly can. The ego is also defined by something called what I do or what I accomplish, so that my identity is all tied in with what it is that I can call my accomplishments. Who I am a writer, I have written this many books, I have this business, I do these kinds of things, and we sort of identify ourselves this way. But I think back to what quantum physics teaches us, that nothing in this physical universe arrives here from, they say that probably the essence of quantum physics is that particles themselves do not originate from particles. That every single particle that makes up the physical form of the world originates someplace else. It originates in what we call non-form or non-existence or spirit or the invisible. And this invisibleness is inside each and every one of us. We originate there. We come from nowhere, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, from nowhere. And in one split second, we go from nowhere to now here, N-O-W-H-E-R-E. Exactly the same, just a little bit different in spacing. While we're here in now here, we recognize, if we're really honest, that where we're going and where we're headed is back to N-O-W-H-E-R-E. The poet T.S. Eliot once said that we shall not cease from exploration, but at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time. I think the poet was speaking about death. My feeling is, and my writing and all of the work that I have done in my lifetime is based upon the idea that we can come to know the place from which we originated without having to leave our bodies, without having to die. That there is something within each and every one of us. One of the great messages of the New Testament in the Christian faith from Jesus was, even the least among you can do all that I have done and even greater things. That it is within each and every one of us to be able to create miracles for ourselves, to be able to heal ourselves of any infirmity, to be able to attract whatever it is that we place our attention on. But the problem with this is, with the development of the ego, is that we have come to believe that being ordinary is our dharma. It's what it is that defines us. And when I use my hand up here like this, I use this part right here at my waist approximately to represent what I call ordinary levels of consciousness. That we come into this world, we are told that you will be identified by and defined by what it is that you accomplish, what it is that you own, what other people think of you. It's another component of the ego. And that you are separate from everyone else, and that these are your limitations. These are the things that you're capable of creating. This is exactly how far you can go. You can't get to a higher place than this. So accept your lot in life. But for me, I have never done that. I was very lucky as a young boy. I lived in an orphanage until I was 10 years of age. And while I was moved around from place to place and didn't have the advantages of having parents that were mine until my mother got us all back together again when I was 10, my father just walked away and abandoned his family. He was, by all definitions, a bad man. A man who was an alcoholic, a man who was very abusive, a man who had no sense of his responsibilities, and left my mother with 3 little boys under the age of 4 to raise by herself. He just disappeared and just went away. And I find it very fascinating because one of the things that I learned in those earliest years of my life is that self-reliance is probably what my dharma was. I came into this world, I believe, to teach this whole idea of self-reliance. And self-reliance means that you go within and you rely upon the self. When you ask the question, who am I, and you define it on the basis of what you have, what you do, what your reputation is, what other people think of you, how much you own, then you keep yourself from reaching this, what I call up here when I move my arm across here at this elevated level, reaching this higher level, what I call extraordinary consciousness. That it's something that each and every one of us have, the same vision that the founder of your country had is something that is possible for each and every one of us to have. Even the least among us have within us the capacity to raise our awareness. The problem is that we are so fixed in our subconscious minds on what our limitations are and what we can't accomplish and what is impossible for us to do, and we get so fixed in on this that we literally begin to act as if this were a reality. So if you are interested in moving to this place where you can indeed perform miracles, where you can create the kind of world for yourself and for others around you from this higher place, if you can get yourself to that place, the only way that you can do it is by changing your concept of yourself. Your self-concept is everything that you believe to be true. So you have been told from the time that you were little boys and little girls about what is possible and what isn't possible. You hang on to this, and it has brought you to this place. If you are living at this place where you think that being able to heal yourself, being able to attract abundance, being able to overcome anything that is depressing or so on is not possible for you, it's because of a set of truths that you have hung on to and believed. They become literally your reality. Back in 1978, I was invited to Vienna in Austria. I had written 2 books that had become huge bestsellers across the world. And this organization called the YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, invited me to come to Vienna and to give a talk to presidents of corporations, very, very successful people. There were several thousand people in the audience. And I was put on a panel. And I was put on a panel to speak to these people. My books were called Your Erroneous Zones and Pulling Your Own Strings. And I was a young man. I was 38 years old. I had been very blessed with great success in the external sense, success. That I was put on this panel, and I was put on the panel with this. When I found out who I was going to be speaking with, I was so incredibly proud and humbled because the man's name was Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, F-R-A-N-K-L. How many know that name, Viktor Frankl? Not too many. Viktor Frankl was in Nazi Germany. He was a professor, and he was a doctor, a medical doctor. And he was taken out of his home and sent to a concentration camp, as was done so frequently back there in the 1930s and early 1940s, when I was just a young boy. And he was practically starved. And Viktor Frankl talked to this audience, and he had written a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And basically his whole theory, it's called logotherapy, his whole theory is that in order to live a highly functioning life, a fully functioning life, to get to a place of extraordinary, that we have to have meaning. And when meaning is taken out of our life, we can no longer function. And he basically said that meaning is a part of the highest part of us. It means that we feel meaning in our lives when we are able to serve and to reach out, rather than to ask ourselves. The ego is dominated by the inner mantra of what's in it for me, how much can I get, how much better am I than somebody else, and the higher self, the highest self, has an inner mantra of how may I serve, what may I do for you. And this man survived probably the worst kinds of conditions in the Holocaust. That was such an ugly scar on humanity in the Second World War. And when he finished his talk, we went to lunch. And he told me, he said, we were given a little bowl of dirty water, and a floating fish head would be in the water. And this was to be our meal for the day. And he said something that I have never forgotten, and I want to share with you here today. He said, when we are challenged in our lives with things over which we have no control, that we can do nothing about, he said, we are then challenged to change ourselves. And this is what it takes to move ourselves from a place of ordinary levels of awareness to extraordinary. We have to be willing to change what it is we believe about ourselves and who we are. And he said, the people in the concentration camps who were not able to find beauty in a floating fish head in a bowl of dirty water virtually always perished because they couldn't change themselves. To change our concept of ourselves, to me, means to move into a place within ourselves in which we say, who I am is no longer going to be defined by something outside of me, by something that someone else tells me is who I should be, that who I am is a piece of God, a piece of the source from which all things originate, to which all things return. This is my identity. And this is who I stand here before you tonight saying about myself. Rumi, the great poet from the 13th century, the great Muslim poet, said that when you are born, a ladder is placed before you to help you to escape from this world that we believe is our reality. But the fact is, I try to identify who I am on the basis of all the things that I was told that brought me to this place. But if I want to get to this place, I have to change the way I view my potential as a human being, what it is that I'm capable of. And this is what I see within myself, and I see is what most people are unable or unwilling to take on or to do for themselves. To say that I am always connected to my source of being, I am going to treat other people with the kind of love that I know that our source of being, God, Allah, Krishna, the great Tao. In the Tao Te Ching, it says that the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. Once you put a name on it, you've lost it. It is doing nothing. It is leaving nothing undone. It is the source of everything. All things originate in non-existence, and our source of being is non-existence, is non-form. So getting to that place within ourselves. For me, it has been a gradual taking another step up that rung, that ladder, until I get myself to the highest place that there is. And I feel that I'm on the edge of that at this point in my life. To be able to have, when someone squeezes me, that out of me, the only thing that can come out of me is that which I originated from. And when we're able to do this, this is the place where we are capable of creating miracles for ourselves. So when I was about 20 years old, I was in the Navy, in the Armed Forces, where I did 4 years. And I was stationed on Guam in the South Pacific. And I developed a cyst at the back of my tailbone called a polynidal cyst. And it seems that a lot of people who went to this part of the world and were not accustomed to this kind of climate developed these things as well. So I went to the doctor in there, and the doctor looked at it, and he said, you're going to have surgery to have that removed. So they sent me over to this hospital in Agana, Guam, And I checked in there on a Thursday, and they said, your surgery is scheduled for Monday morning. So your job for the next 3 days is to assist the people who are having the surgery, who've already had the surgery. And I started to look at some of the people who had been cut open, and it was just a terrifying experience for me to imagine that this was going to be happening to me in a few days. They were going to actually have to go into my backbone and cut this thing out of me. And I worked on Friday and I worked on Saturday at so many people, and the more I looked at that, the more I realized this is not something that I would like to have happen to me. So I went into a place within my own mind, a place that I'd like you to go into, and to begin to use this, this great divine intelligence that you have been given, to use it in a way that I had never used it before, because I did it just to simply say, I do not choose to have this kind of surgery applied to me. And I got very, very quiet, and I began to visualize. I began to get a picture within myself. I began to meditate, get very peaceful, and I started to put energy onto this thing in my back and say to it, I am healed. I am well. I am perfect health. I am no longer going to allow this thing to grow within me. And literally, in 24 hours, I got up on Monday morning when they were preparing me to go into the operation room, and it was gone. I just sent it away by using the power of my own mind. Now, this is something that, now I have 8 children, and as I said, 2 of my daughters are here with me. We've been loving your wonderful country. And I asked one of them to come because my children were raised to believe that they are always connected to their source, that there is nothing that they cannot accomplish, that they have an invisibleness within themselves. And this invisibleness within them can take them away from what everybody else thinks is average. E.E. Cummings, the great poet, said, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best, night and day, to make you just like everybody else, means to fight the greatest battle there is to fight and never stop fighting. My children were raised to believe that there is absolutely nothing that you cannot accomplish if you put your mind to it, and you have within you the power to do exactly that. So my youngest daughter had developed something when she was about 5 years old, and rather than have me tell you, I'm going to have her come up here. Her name is Sage, and she's going to tell you something that I put in one of my books called There's a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. This is my daughter Sage, and my other daughter Serena. Stand up, Serena. This is my other daughter as well, my beautiful girls. And Sage developed this very uncomfortable and unpleasant thing on her face. And we talked to her as her mother and her father, and this is my little girl. Isn't she beautiful?
Okay. So basically, what happened was I was about 5 years old, like he said, and I had developed a rash of bumps on my face. So after a couple weeks of these bumps not going away, my parents eventually took me to a doctor, and the doctor diagnosed them as flatwarts. And he said that flatwarts aren't that uncommon in children, and that they really should go away by themselves within a few months, and they should start to get better and heal, and so on. So a few more months go by, and they're not getting better at all. They're spreading, and they're getting worse, and they're going towards my eyes. So my parents took me back to the doctor and said, you know, what can we do? Because these aren't getting worse. It's her face. You know, they're spreading towards her eyes. You know, they're warts. It's not pleasant. And the doctor said, you know, that the treatments are really harsh, and we should kind of just watch them a little longer because hopefully these warts will go away. And now, so we continue to watch them, and more time goes on. I've had them now for a couple years, and my parents finally took me to another doctor, a different doctor out in Hawaii, a dermatologist, and because they're only getting worse. I've had them like 2 years now. So this doctor, he confirmed the diagnosis. He said they are indeed flatwarts, but you've had them for too long now. Your body's not fighting them, so we're going to have to do something about it. And he said, you have two options. Your first option would be we could burn them off or freeze them off, which would leave scars, and considering how many there are, it would be painful. And now, to me, I'm like 6 or 7 years old at this point. I said, yeah, I'm not interested, and that sounds terrible. So he said, your second option would be you could take an oral medication that may or may not work. It will make your face red. You have to stay out of the sun, and we were in Hawaii. It's hard to stay out of the sun in Hawaii, so I really didn't want to do that either, and my parents knew that I didn't. So when we were in the doctor's office, they looked at me and they said, well, we really think that you have a third option. And I said, okay, what's that? They said, we think that you have the power within yourself to heal yourself, that you can talk to your bumps. I called them my bumps because warts didn't sit well with me, but they said, I think you can talk to your bumps and you can make them go away yourself. You have that power within you to do that. So as a child, a 7-year-old, my parents telling me that, I believed them. I said, okay, I'm going with option number 3. I'm going to go home and talk to my bumps. So that night, I went home and I got in bed and I got under the covers and I pulled the covers over my head, and for about 5 minutes before I went to sleep, I talked to my bumps in my head, mentally. And I did that for 3 more nights, and on the 4th night, I got in bed to talk to them again, and I reached up and I touched my face, and it was completely smooth. They were gone. I was so happy. I jumped out of bed and I ran into my parents' room and I jumped in their bed, and I exclaimed, "They're gone! I can't believe it. My face is smooth." And my parents felt my face and they were amazed as well. And they said, my dad looked at me and said, "Well, what did you say to them?" So. And I was a little embarrassed, and I didn't want to tell them, so I said it was a secret. And my dad, he begged me to tell him. He tried bribing me for a couple weeks. This goes on. He's like, "I'll take you for ice cream if you tell me." It's like, "I'm not telling you. It's a secret." So they eventually gave up asking me, and then it came up again just a few years ago when I was like 18 years old, and I was like, okay, I can tell you now. I guess it's not a secret anymore. So I told my dad that, when I talked to them, I sent them love. I told them that I loved them, but that we couldn't be together anymore, and that, and I, thank you, and I pictured them, thank you. I pictured them falling off my face, and I pictured myself having smooth, clear skin, and that's exactly what happened. And I think that the reason that it was so easy for me as a child, and the reason that it worked in a matter of 3 days, is because I really believed that I could do that. I had no doubt in my mind that I was going to be capable of curing myself of these bumps. And the reason that I had no doubt is because I had my parents telling me that I could. And at that age, your parents telling you can do something, you're going to believe them. You think your parents know everything. And
that's true.
And then you get older and you realize they don't.
What was that?
Just kidding. But yeah, and I think the other reason that it worked for me is because as a child, I didn't sit there and obsess over healing myself. I talked to them for 5 minutes, and then in the morning I went out and played and I forgot about it. And then when I got in bed, I did it again. So I wasn't, by obsessing over it, I think, because as an adult, sometimes we try to manifest something, or we want to attract something into our lives, and we start to obsess over it, or fear that we're not going to get it. And they're kind of the same thing, because if you obsess over it, you're basically saying to the universe, "I don't have it," And then you're fearing that you're not going to get it. But as a child, there was none of that involved. I knew it was going to work, and it worked.
Great. Thank you, honey, very much. Very good. Good job. Now, and the lesson to you as parents or whomever it is that you were, is to not tell people that you're limited, that these are things that you can't do. I decided at that time when I was in my 20s, when I had removed this cyst from the back, from my back, and that was a ward where I was in, where a whole lot of people had that very similar thing, and everyone were going through the surgery, that this power that we have, this is basically the capacity to be able to attract and do anything. It was like one of those magical things. I decided, if I can do that, then what else is it that I have within me? What power do I have within me to be able to manifest or create or heal something from myself? So I made a decision that I wasn't going to have a cold for the rest of my life. I just said, why in the world should I choose colds or be susceptible to messages that say, this is the flu season? So like this, now it's got its own season, you know, and that you are why not? And I would tell my children this all the time, you don't have to have a cold. It's not something that has to continue with you. But I have a brother who, if he gets a sniffle on a Monday morning, the first thing he says is, I've got this sniffle. He said it to me one time. He said, it's in my nose. He said, tomorrow it'll be in my throat. This is how he's using this divine intelligence that he has, this invisibleness within himself. He said, by Wednesday it'll be down in my chest. He said, I'll probably have a fever on Thursday. I'm going to have to take Friday off. He's taking Friday off with a fever, and it's Monday morning, and he's got a sniffle. And we do this not just with colds, we do it with so many other things. I was in the exercise room where I live in Florida, and there's a guy in there, and he's got Snoopy's coming out of his nose, and he's just all a mess, and he's got, I guess he's got whatever it is that is going around. I guess it just goes around. And I said to him, Ralph, I said, so how long have you had this thing? He said, Wayne, in 2 weeks, it'll be a month. Now think about the logic of what this person is saying. In 2 weeks, it's going to be a month. Now, the idea that we have this ability within us, the power within us, to be able to visualize, when I think of that, the simple little example, I think of it with getting a place to park. I have never had a problem getting a place to park in my life, because when I go someplace, I'm looking for a place to park. Most people are looking for no place to park. And when you're looking for no place to park, because there's no parking places around here, you're going to attract exactly what it is. And it works in so many ways, but the simple little example that I'm using here, and then I think about your country, and I think about Libya. 2 countries that had basically the same thing, and one person has a vision of what this country is going to look like, what it's going to be, who we're going to be an oasis in a world which has so many things that we're doing. And another vision is a world in which, well, you know what the outcome is. It's the willingness to go within and to recognize that who you are has nothing to do with what you have or what you do or what you accomplish. And it doesn't, I mean, someone was asking me this morning, yes, but what if you live in a culture which emphasizes that so strongly? But the culture is not what's within you. Nobody can touch that. That is your divinity. Your ego is the part of you that has come to believe, and it's why it's called the false self, is come to believe in all of the limitations that are based upon an identification of myself as a being who has to define himself by what he has, what he does, what he accomplishes, and what other people think of him. There was a great poet in India back in the 1920s who won the Nobel Prize for Literature for a collection of poetry called the Gitanjali. His name was Rabindranath Tagore. Tagore was a ball, B-A-U-L, a ball. The balls were a very select group of people who didn't have any religion, But the only thing that they represented and worshipped was unconditional divine love. It's like every thought, and when the children from the time that they were just little babies all the way up through, everyone in their community only celebrated love and were taught this is how we react to everything and everyone. And Tagore was one of these people. And Tagore had in the Gitanjali, he had a poem about the ego. And it goes like this. He said, I went out alone on my way to my tryst. But who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company. This ego, this false self, this part of us that believes that our identity is something external to ourselves and that other people have power over us, is something that each and every one of us have the power to eradicate from our lives. I was in a seminar a few years back, and they asked us to take a 5x7 card like this and to write down on this card the 5 chapters of our life at this stage. I was about 50 years old at the time, and I wrote down what it is, the various stages my life has gone through, and we turned it in. And there was a woman there with me, her name was Portia Nelson, who just passed away a short time ago, a very, very dear and wonderful woman. And she wrote something on her 5 cards to identify what the chapters of her life were, and I'd like to share them with you. She said, chapter 1 of my life. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. And it takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault, and it still takes a long time to get out. She said, chapter 3 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my own fault. And I get out immediately. Chapter 4 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5 of my life. I walk down another street. Isn't that beautiful? I walk down another street. And walking down another street is where we begin to see our true divinity. We begin to see who it is that we really are. That my teacher, Nisargadatta, said when asked the question, what is real, Master, what is real? He said, that is real which never changes. So, ask yourself the question, what part of me meets that definition and makes me real? What part of me has never changed? I have a picture of myself on my wall when I was 21 years old, and I can't find one cell of that being left here on this planet today. When I was 21 years old, I believed that who I am was that body and what it owns and what it has accomplished and what other people thought of it and so on, totally convinced of it. Now I have left that body, and every single cell of it has gone someplace else. It's not here on this planet anywhere. I'd like to find it, but it's not there. But the I that is called Wayne Dyer occupied another body when I was 22, and when I was 25, and when I was 30, and when I was 40. And there was a time when I was a little teenager. I was a time when, like you watch your children, you watch them grow, and they go through these various stages, and you begin to see that the physical universe is something that is constantly in a state of change. William Blake once said, "To see the world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wildflower, to hold eternity in the palm of your hand, and infinity in an hour, we are all led to believe a lie when we see with, not through the eye, which was born in a night to perish in a night, while the soul slept in beams of light." This soul, this invisibleness that we are, that which is looking out from behind your eyeballs, has no form to it. You can't get a hold of it. You can't see it. You can't cut into the brain. There is a command center in the brain that I say, if I want to just get up here and if I just want to wiggle my finger, and you think, well, that's no big deal. I just think I'm just wiggle my finger, and then you do it, and then you stop and realize what an amazing thing that is to be able to do. That there's something invisible within you in the command center in your brain that says, wiggle your finger, and then you do it. And you can't see it. You can't get a hold of it. And for those who believe that it's just pure science and nothing else, I have a friend who's a neurosurgeon, and he told me, he said, "Wayne, you know, I've opened up a lot of brains, and I've looked inside," and he said, "I've never seen anything." He said, "I only believe in what I can see, and what you talk about is just out there." I said to him, I said, "Doc, have you ever, when you opened that brain and looked inside, have you ever seen a thought in there?" No, you can't see that because it's invisible. Now, I've just moved my leg over here, I move it up here, I go over. Every single movement, everything that I am capable and able to do comes from this command center inside. And science can go in and find the command center. But no scientist has ever been able to go into that command center and find the commander in the command center who says, "I think I'm going to wiggle my finger. I think I'm going to get rid of this cold. I think I'm going to create a new kind of country in this world based upon a different kind of a vision." And nobody can see it, nobody can get a hold of it, but it is deeply within each and every one of us. And all of us, we come from the same source of being, we return to the same source of being, and we deny the existence of the power that we have to move ourselves from an extraordinary level of ordinary level of consciousness into a place up here where the words that are spoken so prophetically and so profoundly in the spiritual literature, with God, all things are possible. God is something that is in each and every one of you. One of my favorite poems from a man who has influenced my life in a very big way, who lived back in the 13th century, named Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, was asked the question in this poem, "Where is he?" I tried to find him on the Christian cross, but he was not there. I went to the temple of the Hindus and to the old pagodas, but I could not find a trace of him anywhere. I searched on the mountains and in the valleys, but neither in the heights nor in the depths was I able to find him. I went to the Kaaba in Mecca, but he was not there either. I questioned the scholars and the philosophers, but he was beyond their understanding. I then looked into my heart, and it was there where he dwelled. And I saw him. He was nowhere else to be found. He was nowhere else to be found. God, Allah, Krishna, the great Tao, the divine mind, the divine intelligence, it makes no difference what we call it. It is what we are. And when we live from that place, we find that the only thing that defines it is something called love. That when we have that within us, and that's the only thing that we have to give away. A great teacher in India many years ago, back 2,300 years ago, named Patanjali, defined this kind of elevated consciousness. He said, when you are steadfast, and this is what I encourage for you, and this is the ladder that I have been climbing since I was a little boy in an orphanage, all the way up through all the writing that I have done and the raising of children, and here I am now at the age of 72, and got to the top of this ladder that was placed before me, that was put there so that I could escape from this world, meaning I could escape from the illusion that this physical world is what defines me. If it is constantly changing, then it can't be real. It can't be. Because the minute that you say, that's real, and then you look at it and it's different, what is that? Is the 20-year-old body that I was in real if it doesn't exist anymore? The invisibleness, the formlessness, the boundarylessness of who I am is what is real. And Patanjali said, when you are steadfast in your abstention of thoughts of harm directed towards yourself and others, that all living creatures will cease to feel fear in your presence. You can have that kind of elevated consciousness when you shift from the ego, whose mantra is, what's in it for me? How much can I get? How much can I make? How good am I going to look? How much power am I going to have? To the place when you get up higher and higher on that ladder, where the internal mantra says, how may I serve? How may I serve? How may I reach out and do something profound and beautiful for those around me? You are all the beneficiaries of a prophet named Sheikh Zayed, a prophet who had within him that kind of awareness that I am not going to take the idea that I am better, bigger, stronger, more powerful because I have more. I'm going to take what has been given to me and I'm going to extend it to all of those around me. And as we begin to think in these ways, live from this level of consciousness, we shift and we find, as this final poem demonstrates. I am a poet. I write a lot of poetry. I've written a lot of poetry, studied it, taught it at the university. I always thought you would come to me in the shape of a beautiful lover. I never dreamed you would steal my heart with no shape at all. I always pretended I needed arms to hold me and lips to kiss away my pain. Yet I find fulfillment in the embrace of empty space. I always wished you would speak to me with words of tender sweetness, but I know you whisper silently of your unending love. I always knew I would find you, although I foolishly looked with my eyes. You were here with me all along, hiding just outside and out of sight of my heart. It's within each and every one of us. divine consciousness, divine love. Love has three faces. Human love is a love that changes and a love that varies. I love you a lot because you're so nice to me, but you weren't so nice to me now, and you forgot to do this, and you didn't do that, so I don't love you as much. And it varies. Sometimes I love you, and sometimes I don't love you very much at all. That's what we call human love. Spiritual love is the love that you have for your children, that I have for my children who sit there with me here on this trip. It's a love that never changes. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter how bad they are. It doesn't matter whether they please me or don't please me. My love for them is infinite. But it varies. It's stronger sometimes and not as strong as others. The love I'm asking you to consider is a love called divine love. And divine love is a love that never changes and never varies. It's a love that is just like the juice inside of that orange. No matter how you squeeze it, it makes no difference. The only thing that comes out is what's inside. And this interior part of you that we call the soul or the spirit, the way it is defined is that it is infinite. And infinite means it doesn't stop and it doesn't begin. It's birthless, it's deathless, and it's changeless. And it's who you are. Looking out in this illusion called your body, which an hour from now will be a different body. So which one is real? Your soul only wants to expand. Before I had children, I had 8 theories about how to raise children. Now I have 8 children and no theories. But one of the things I know for sure about raising children is that nobody likes being told what to do because it's an insult to their soul. Their soul does not want to be compartmentalized. It does not want to be put into a box. It does not want to be told what its limitations are. Your spirit, your interiorness, the part that you can't get a hold of but you know is always there, it's infinite, meaning it doesn't stop anywhere. And if it doesn't stop anywhere, it is always expanding. And the minute that anybody comes along and tries to restrict it, put it in a box, tell it what it can be and what it can't be, it's miserable. Don't allow anybody to put you in a box. Who you are is a divine piece of the source, of God. And move in your life to a place where you understand it's who you are. Again, to close with my great teacher, Rumi, from the 13th century. You who seek God, apart, that which you seek, thou art. If you want to seek the beloved's face, polish the mirror and gaze into that space. Because in every moment of your life and mine, we have this choice. You can either be a host to God or a hostage to your ego. It's up to you. God bless you, and thanks for listening. Thank you. Thank you so much.